back to the pod.
We're back.
We know it's been a while, and we thank you for your patience, but we just got to the point where we could, where our schedule's freed up a little bit, so we can go ahead and knock this one out. Before we get in any further than that, I want to apologize for the wait, and I also want to thank everybody for checking in on us and for all the support we've been getting. You know, I've been getting texts and saying, you know, where is it? You know, I like what you're doing with the pod, and so I appreciate you guys for all that. This time we're just going to be talking about conversational magic. How do you navigate conversations?
Absolutely.
Let me hear what you think about that.
So, you know, me, I just went through my first semester of college.
Sure.
And it's been an eye-opening experience for me because I've had the chance and the opportunity to conversate with a lot of different people. I've had the chance to be in rooms with higher-ups of the university. I've also had the chance to just have natural, low-level conversation with people. And it's really been an eye-opener for me. And I've been kind of understanding, because me and my roommate, we would love to have conversations late at night and just talk about emotional conversation. And I've come to this understanding that there's different levels to conversation. So I've categorized it in 3 different ways. So the first stage of conversation is your natural-minded, low-level conversation.
I was going to ask you about the low level versus high level. Go ahead.
And then the second level I put is educational conversation, right?
Absolutely.
And then I
The
put
third level?
at the third level was emotional conversation. I feel like it's the conversation that is the hardest to have, sharing your emotions and being emotionally available and emotionally open to other people.
Certainly.
So I want to go through this pod and kind of break all of those down. So let's start
Yeah,
off
I'd
with
love to hear.
low level natural minded conversation. So low level conversation to me is like your everyday type of conversation, whether it be about sports, whether it's like office work, whether you're just conversating, you know, amongst your peers. It's conversation that you really don't think about.
Some like small talk, like something that's not really going to help you accomplish goals or ideas, right?
Right.
Okay.
And then your educational conversation are conversations where you're learning, right? Where you're processing material, where you're processing and understanding different things. You know, it's almost like compare and contrast. You know, it's like somebody says something, you really intake it, you think about it, right? Then there comes emotional conversation. This is where it's like conversation where it's one-on-one conversation. This is where stuff is really confidential because you're understanding people's emotions. You have to be emotionally open in the situation. You have to be emotionally available, right? And it's really requiring your emotional intelligence to have this conversation, right?
Yeah. I just had one of these just not too long ago. As a matter of fact, I was talking to my friend. I said some stuff that I probably should not have said. And you know, the next day I thought about it and I said, look, maybe it's time that I apologize.
You take that step of reflection, right? Absolutely. And I think the thing with having emotional conversation is because people are not used to having emotional conversation.
Most people don't.
It's not something that comes natural to people. And I think I also deal with this issue as well because I feel like for me to have an emotional conversation, I have to will myself to do it, right? And it's because, number one, you haven't been in enough emotional conversations throughout your life that will get you prepared, right? And some people don't naturally see emotional conversation.
Some people never see.
So it's hard to do something that you've never been taught to do.
Yeah,
and emotional
absolutely.
Conversations are not taught in every household.
They're not taught in school, that's
right.
For sure.
It's not taught in school, so it's hard for a person to have a conversation that they're not used to having. And I think that there are steps that can prepare you to have an emotional conversation. And I think,
what do you think those are?
And I think number one is you have to reflect on yourself first, right?
Right.
You have to understand yourself and where your emotions are at during that time period. I feel like that's the number one step.
Especially when you have to
Self-reflection.
apologize for something.
Yeah,
because you say, like, what part of me caused, you know, that situation to happen? Like, say you said something to your friend and they didn't take too kindly to it and you didn't, and that's why it's so important. You got to think about what you say before you say
Right,
it.
absolutely.
But with that being said, like, you once you say that, it's already said. So once you have to get to that point where you need to apologize, you say, okay, what part of me caused this exact situation? And that could be the mental part of you. It could be the physical part of you.
Right.
Maybe you're going through something, physically, like your back hurts or just some random something like that. So you were just on edge and you were feeling, and that's a real thing because all of these planes of consciousness, including like mental, physical, emotional, all of that stuff, you're constantly getting bombarded with all these different outer stimuli at all times, and it's up to you which one you want to pay attention to, and they all, depending on which one you pay attention to the most, they affect the way you act in different ways.
Absolutely.
So I think it's incredibly important to notice that and to realize that which part of yourself is causing this problem before you go into any kind of emotionally charged conversation, especially ones that where it would be considered difficult in terms of even outside of like when I talk emotional rather than like just hey, this is how I feel and this happened to me and I struggle with this. Rather than that, I mean difficult conversations where, like, for example, you're a boss of a company and you got to say, look, it's just not working anymore.
Right.
And it's nothing personal about you. There's no problem with you. I don't have any, hard feelings towards you. But it's just, I got to keep the interest of the company first.
Right. And it's hard to express those feelings. But I think the number one, the second part aspect to it, because we said we have to self-reflect first, right? Mm-hmm. Number two, you have to be able to communicate, effectively communicate.
I wanted to bring that point up. Go ahead, please.
I think that's number two. In effective communication, number one, you have to be able to communicate your intent, right?
Certainly. There's no more important thing.
And there's nothing more important because if you're not able to communicate effectively, no one's truly ever going to know how you feel, right? And you have to.
That's so true.
And I think the truth is exposed through true communication.
Absolutely.
Because no matter what, there's no purpose behind concealing your emotions, right? There's times where you have to conceal your intentions, but I don't think it's good for the soul and the heart for you to conceal your emotions, right? I think it's better to truly and naturally express your emotions.
Absolutely.
So I think number two is effectively communicating how you feel. And
100%.
don't feel like you need to hide something. You got to keep something away. If it's time, there's always going to be a time and place. But truly say how you feel. Don't hold nothing back.
Yeah, and effective communication is important on literally, any relationship.
Right.
And a lot of people say that's the number one thing in a relationship. Effective communication, you have to be open, honest, and honesty comes with communication effectively. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And even piggybacking off of that point right there, effectively communicating, if you ask, I believe it was some crazy number, like 80% of CEO owners, when they were asked about their favorite trait about themselves, they overwhelmingly, and it was definitely over 50%, don't quote me on the exact number, I believe it was over 80, it might have been even up to 90, they said their favorite trait about themselves was their ability to communicate their ideas effectively to other people, because it doesn't matter how much insight you have, how valuable it is, if whenever you say it, nobody understands. Why does it matter? You could be the most enlightened person in the world, like you've met God, you spoke to God, God spoke to you, but you can't express that to other people, and they'll just be like, well, I don't believe him, because, I didn't even understand what he was saying. Why would God say that to him? You know what I mean?
Right.
Even though God could have said the most absolutely eye-opening, life-changing, groundbreaking thing to them, and they just didn't know how to communicate it to other people. And people have told me throughout my entire life that I'm good at communicating my ideas with others. And what I've been working on recently is focusing less on communicating with others, because I feel like I'm generally, not to toot my own horn, I'm pretty good at communicating my ideas with other people, generally speaking.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, I have my times where I fail, and you know that as much as anybody else. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
But anyway, what I've been really focusing on is finally learning how to listen. And I wanted to ask you this.
Yes, because that's going to bring up a point later on that I'm going to speak on.
Good. But I want to ask you this, though. Do you think it's more important? It's crazy how these connect. It really is. We both had these topics that we wanted to bring up. But anyway, so is it more important to listen effectively or to communicate effectively? Which one is going to take you further in life?
Well, honestly, you have to listen in order to be able to communicate effectively, because it's your intaking information, right?
But which one on its own?
Honestly,
if you had one or the other.
I'm going to listen before I speak. That's just my opinion. Now everybody has a different opinion, but my thing is there comes something when it. So I always separate hearing from listening. Because,
really?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So it's one thing to hear somebody, but it's another thing to truly listen to somebody. Because I can hear what you say, but that doesn't mean I intake the information that you say.
You could even parrot it back to me.
Right. But if I listen to what you say, that means I've truly thought about and intook the information that you said, and I've applied it to myself. Now, when it comes to reciprocating that knowledge back to you, I'm able to say it back to you because I've listened to what you say. So there's a difference between hearing somebody and there's a difference between listening to somebody. Now, when it comes to communicating effectively, because we're talking about communicating versus listening.
Certainly, yeah.
The number one thing when it comes to communicating is always having purpose behind what you say. Now, your intentions drive purpose.
Sure.
And your purpose will lead your communication.
Let me make sure I understand. The point you're trying to make to me right now is that you have to have a clear and defined intention behind what you say before you communicate effectively.
Absolutely, that's what I'm.
Because you can't just go off the brain, have nothing to say, and then just expect, it'll just all fall into place.
You can just start blurring out thoughts. Right?
I never even thought about it that way.
You can just start blurting out thoughts, right? But if you just say things randomly, what are you trying to leave with somebody, right? You should always try and make your mark on somebody, right?
Absolutely.
Always, they should take something away from you, right? Because if you walk in a room full of bosses and CEOs and you're just saying things that don't really matter, what are they going to take away from you? But if you have something for them to take away, you have purpose behind what you say, right? They're 10 times more likely to be like, let me have a conversation with this person. Let me see what this conversation is. Right. You're giving valuable insight to somebody.
You know, that reminds me of one of my absolute favorite lessons that my aunt taught me. And it comes in the form of a poem she wrote for my cousin before he was born. And I read it through for the first time maybe 5 years ago or so. And it never really hit me until like a couple years ago when I reread it and I said, oh my gosh, that is genius, brilliant. It changed the way I viewed my aunt because I didn't really think of her. I loved her to death, but I never really thought of her as like the deep, insightful person because we had never really had those conversations. Now, let me get it clear, we have those conversations all the time, and I still love her to death, obviously. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make, in this poem, the last line in it, the last line was, your goal in life is not one of fame nor fortune, but rather it's very simple. To make each person you meet a better person for having known you. Isn't that genius?
That's deep.
It's genius, and I love to apply that I'm going to preface it with this. I don't succeed all the time, and I never want anybody to feel that I do.
Absolutely.
But we don't want anybody to think that just because we're sitting here talking talking about the philosophies that we've learned, that we have them down to a T all the time.
Absolutely.
With that being said, though, I'd still want to keep talking about what my auntie said in this, because it has helped me tremendously. And another thing she said, I saw her at Disney World. On the senior trip on Disney World, it was the most random, crazy experience. It was unreal. So she's at my house. My aunt, my uncle, and my cousin visit my house every year right after Christmas, stay for New Year's. All right? So we're sitting there, and I was like, I'm excited. I'm going on my senior trip in March. You remember the senior trip in March?
Absolutely. I remember that senior trip.
Yeah. It was a fun time, man. Woo. Fun time. Anyway, they go, March? What day in March? I said, I don't know. Let me check. I said, like the 9th to like the 14th, I think is what it was. I don't remember exactly. They go, no way! We're going to be there at that time. I said, you're kidding. You're kidding. You're going to be there at the same time as me? So obviously, I'm there, they were there at the same time as me. And I'm like, oh man, I got to split up my time between my friends and my family. But that was too long of an explanation. But the point I'm trying to make is very simple. She taught me another gem of information. I asked her the question. I said, Karen is her name. I said, Karen, how do you handle difficult situations, maybe a situation you should have handled in a better way, maybe a situation you wanted to have said something different and you didn't, and you are upset with yourself for that. How do you handle something like that? Because she's got a very strong mindset about most things. It's incredible, really. But she said something that I'll think about it forever. She said, whenever I have a situation like that, after it's done, I say, look, did I handle myself or handle that situation in the best way possible? And then if the answer is yes, and you're still upset about it, then you have to say, hey, I did as good as I can. Like if you're having one of those, we'll get back to what we just said, if you're having one of those difficult conversations, maybe you're a boss, you got to talk to somebody, you say, look, it's just not working out. Did I handle that in the best way possible? I may have, and they may have still gotten upset. Such is life. Such is life. But if you handled something, maybe you could have handled it better, then you have to say, I didn't handle it in the best way possible, but now I know how to handle it next time. Say you're a boss, I'm going to keep going back to this. And you handle it and you say, hey, guess what, buddy? Dandy. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's no way to fire somebody. You don't just go, hey man, I took the liberty of packing all your stuff and I just went ahead and throw it in the dumpster, so we'll see you never again.
Right.
You know what I mean? But anyway, the point is, it takes finesse to have a conversation like that, and you have to ask yourself if you handle it in the best possible way. And you can't be too hard on yourself if you did handle it in the best possible way. And that's why I say my auntie, she's just such a wealth, a fountain of information. It's crazy every time. And she's been through so much.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, we learn the most through elderly figures. Because they have so much wisdom that's applicable to our lives, because most of these people have lived our lives 2-3 times already. They've seen so much more than what we've seen.
That's facts. That's facts, dude.
So understanding and taking time to have intellectual conversation with them can sometimes be some of the most impactful conversations you can have in your life. And the knowledge that you take from that, you now can apply to your daily life. That's why I always say it's a difference between hearing and listening. Number one, it affects you because you make the decision whether you want to hear somebody or whether you want to listen to somebody. The second part to that is intaking the information. Once again, it's your choice to either intake it or just leave it on the table, right?
Yeah.
So this is all stuff that comes down to you, right? And I always say have purpose behind what you say, because it's like having a belief, right? Belief only goes so far as to the effort that you put into it, right? And I want you to remember that, right? This is part
Say that again.
Belief only goes so far as to the effort that you put into it. I need somebody.
I don't think I got that first part. It took a second time, and now I realize the weight of what he just said. Right.
I need somebody to put that down in the comments for me. Type that out in the chat, because this is really knowledge that you could stand on. I hope you do. Stand on business.
Guys, yeah. And if you have any valuable insight that you'd like us to know, please put that in the comments section.
Please put it in the comments too.
Because Christian and I are always looking for new philosophies and mindsets, and we'd love to respond to you. And like I said, I've already gotten some incredible support from you guys, which I really do appreciate. I'm sure Christian does too.
But I really want to expand on that point. So I'm going to say it one more time. So belief only goes so far as to the effort that you put into it. So Christian, what does that mean? What I mean by that is, let's say you have a belief. You can have a belief, but you do nothing about it, right? So let's just say that there was a conflict, right, that you believe in, right? And you'll do anything to achieve that conflict, to bring promotion to that conflict, to have people behind that conflict, right? And, a lot of people will speak up about it. Some people will stand back on it. But if you want to see change, you have to create the change. You have to create the drive. And it all comes from inside of you. You have the power to do it. It's just about applying yourself to do it, right? So there's situations where some people will take a step back. There's some people that will take a step forward. It's just about your mindset. What are you going to do to create change, right? And here's how it ties back to listening and conversation. It relates to conversation because you have to, number one, state your belief. You have to state your belief in what you believe in, right? What are you for? What is the purpose behind what you are saying? What do you want to see, right? That's how I tie it all back to conversation, because when you speak, what do people take away from you, right? So you can say a lot of stuff, but it has no meaning. But I can say one thing and people take 20 different things from that one thing that I said.
And that's crazy to think about too. The fact that, because everyone has their own perception of what you say,
Right.
and even more importantly, I don't know if you struggle with this. I'm sure you've struggled with it at some point. I know I struggle with it all the time, because I'm constantly, when people are talking, I say, and that's part of the reason why I think, this is a pretty decent gig for me, because my mind just, like, when people are talking for some reason, I say, oh, that's interesting. That reminds me of this. That reminds me of that. But I struggle with a lot of times when somebody's talking, I'm not truly listening, but rather, instead of truly listening to what the person's saying, I'm listening to my mind, what my mind thinks about that.
Your
Oh,
own.
I wouldn't have said it like that. I would have said it like this, and that reminds me of this, and that, and then I also, I'll get to that point in a minute. I just want to see. You ever struggle with something like that?
I think I do at certain times, honestly. I think when somebody's talking, I think my own thoughts are kind of intruding with what they're saying. And no matter what's going on up there, I think I have to focus truly on what's happening in the moment. I have to allow myself to be open, emotionally open to what they're saying. Because sometimes you might just put off a person off of sight, right? You might not really.
Yeah.
You might not. You might not really want to listen to what they say because number one, your emotions, so you're like, oh, I'm tired. I don't really feel like listening. I don't really want to be here talking to this person.
It's not very interesting.
It's not very interesting, right?
Sure.
And lo and behold, like that same person that you was talking to, now they're up on stage giving a presentation, a speech to the whole university or something. Like, and you're just like, wow, I just was having a conversation. I didn't even pay attention to this kid. I could have had an opportunity from this kid. I could have gained something. It's like also talking to an elder or a staff member. It's like you might not view them as somebody that can be important to your life, but long and behold, the opportunity comes and you get to the chance to have an encounter with this person, and your whole life has changed because now they're giving you opportunities that you didn't think you could have.
Yeah. I'm fully of the mind that you can learn something from absolutely anybody.
You really can. And it just takes time for you to apply yourself.
Yeah, it takes time, and I want to reiterate that point. I am fully 100,000% convinced you can learn something from anyone.
Okay. There's a lot.
Anyone.
There's so many lessons that you don't know.
Yeah,
there's so many lessons that you haven't learned yet. You might think that you know it and you've heard something before, and you hear it again and you think about it completely different. And it can continually be said, but as time goes on, I'm hoping that your brain and that your emotional intelligence is growing, right? For you to intake it and be able to continually transform your perception on it. And that's, as humans, as we grow, our maturity level will grow, but our emotional intelligence will grow because we're hopefully more open to things. You shouldn't be closed off to certain things because, like, if I was closed off to you, Chris, right, I can miss an opportunity from having an encounter with you because my heart was closed off to you. Let's just say I didn't like your appearance. I didn't like the type of person that you were, right? But I never knew you. I never had an encounter with you. So now I'm blocking you off of my personal internal thoughts. Meanwhile, if I was open and I was like, let me see what he's about, right? Then I understood what you were about. And then I can make my own reality as if I want to continue to have conversations or not. Because some people are for you, some people are not for you. But
Certainly.
It's for you to decide who you could couture to.
Yeah, I was just going to make that point, and you just made it perfectly right there. I was going to say it goes both ways about, because when you brought up, maybe the next moment they're on the stage giving a speech to everybody. And it goes both ways because maybe they're up on the stage giving a speech to everybody, but really, like, all that stuff is just rehearsed and it's not real. And maybe, like, you have a genuine conversation with them and they don't want to talk about like real ideas. They'd rather talk about the new Jordans that came out, as
Right.
Kevin Gates said. You know what I mean? So I mean, it really it's so important to give everybody the time of day, and I do my absolute best to give everybody the time of day, regardless of who they are, who they might seem to be, and because you never know.
And I think you should just give them a chance. That necessarily doesn't mean that you have to continually be open to them after that, but just give them a chance. See what kind of person that they are. And if that's not the type of person for you that you want to be around, that's okay. You make decisions for your life. You have to understand that. You go off of your principles, your morals, what you base your life off of, right?
Mm.
And you come back to that and be like, okay, does what he said apply to my principles? Does it apply to my morals? Does he seem like the type of guy that I want to be around, or the type of girl that I want to be around? And if that answer is no, that answer is no. If the answer is yes, then you slowly, I'm not saying, boom, put them right in your friend group. Don't put them close in your circle. No, that's not what I'm saying. Keep your circle tight. Have people, trusted people.
We were just talking about that.
Have trusted people in your circle. The rest of these people are just acquaintances that you can like go to have natural minded conversation, right? Once you feel like you're on a level with them that's past natural minded conversation, that's when you feel like you're starting to get closer to them. You don't naturally just put somebody in your circle. That's the number one way to like completely just get rid of yourself. Like just take yourself out of the game. When you put somebody that you don't know, when you don't trust in your circle, they could just take everything, bro. Put you right back to step number one. But if you slowly evaluate them through time, all the truth will start to be revealed about them, because you're keeping an eye on them, but you're living your life. And you're allowing them to live their life. So now the actions that they do, you see that through the side eye. Now you can make assumptions and judgments based on how they're acting and what they're doing. So all of that, you realize that, but they weren't even in your circle, but you knew that about them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And with all that being said, I mean, I do want to wrap this back to communicating effectively. And
Absolutely.
my last point before we let it go, because we're already running up on the 30-minute mark. Feels like we've been talking for 5 minutes.
Conversation could go. This is just the art of having conversation.
Like, it's feels like we've been talking for 5 minutes.
Right, and that's why I said the art of having conversation is so beautiful, because there's so much that can go into it and there's so much behind it. So truly, feel like have somebody that you can have effective communication with. I'm telling you, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
And before we let this go, I want to make my last point here. You have to be effective in communicating with yourself as well. It's not just about communicating effectively with others, because if you don't communicate effectively with yourself, you can't communicate effectively with others. That's just the bottom line. It doesn't get any simpler than that.
And I think my last point is going to be, allow yourself to be open, right?
Always be open.
Allow yourself to be open. Don't always close yourself off to certain things. Just allow your emotions to naturally develop. Be naturally open. And I promise you that you will grow in maturity. You will grow in your conversation. And you'll also grow in having conversations with different kinds of people. I promise you.
All right, guys. Thank you guys for watching. If you stayed around to the end, we really definitely appreciate you.
Absolutely.
And thank you for, like I said one more time, sticking around and being patient with us. We'll definitely get back on the grind, especially while Christian's back from college. Sure. And then we'll see y'all in the next one, all right?